Welcome to the Woven Energy Podcast with me, Joseph Sikora, and Damon Smith. It's absolutely brilliant to be back. This is episode 43, and as always, we're going to be talking about shamanism from the ground up. So, I've got a bit of a treat for you today, or Damon has anyway. We're going to talk about a practical technique, specifically on stage 3. It's going to involve the shaman's drum, which is always interesting, and it's important to point out before we start here that, you know, it's important to have familiarity and really have got to grips with each of the stages so far. So we go into lots of detail on each of the stages in this podcast. You know, we've talked about stage 1 in quite some depth, stage 2 in quite some depth, and we're kind of here on stage 3. But each one of those stages rests on the previous one. It's really important that you have enough experience on each of those stages, because they support each other very much like the layers of a pagoda, right, Damon?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you said this episode's going to be a treat. I mean, if you're not a regular listener, this episode's definitely not going to be a treat. It's going to be probably quite hard to understand. If this is your first contact with the Woven Energy podcast, this is a kind of linear podcast, as Joe's hinting at. We've built a chain. It's almost like a course or something, isn't it, rather than a podcast? So the best thing you can possibly do is wind all the way back to episode 1 and start working forwards from there. If you are the kind of person who listens to every episode more than once, which I know some of our listeners do that, and then you're definitely the kind of person who wants to be listening to this episode. That's probably the best way to put it.
Excellent.
Yeah. So speaking of which, we've a little while since we've done a Woven Energy episode, and so we have had a considerable number of patrons since the last one that we recorded. So I'm going to, rather than taking too long doing it, I'm just going to thank them all very briefly by name. I think they've all been thanked on the Heretics podcast, our sister podcast, anyway. But let's just go through. So we've got Bryn Winkle, Max St. John, Brett Galloway. David Horswell put his contribution up. He's a long-standing patron. Thank you, David. Sampo Sutella, who's also put his contribution up very recently. Thank you very much, Sampo. That's amazing. And then I'm just scrolling up the list to get the next ones. We got Mika Vikberg and Anthony Whitlock. Thanks, guys. Then we got a founder patron, which is amazing, who is anonymous, so we're calling him Harry, in inverted commas. Thanks very much, Harry. That's great. Neil Mickle and Stephen Harvey is our most recent patron. Thanks ever so much, Stephen. That's amazing.
Wow, quite a haul there, Damon. I had no idea.
You're not kidding.
Thank you ever so much, guys.
I think I've said it a million times, but you know, at one time I'd have been happy with that number of listeners. In fact, I would have been delighted with that number of listeners. so the fact that they're patrons is just phenomenal. Phenomenal. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so should we dive in?
Yeah, that's cool.
So this is a level 3 technique, and it's going to involve the drum. So hopefully you've all purchased your shamanic drum. Damon, do you want to just briefly, I don't know whether you want to do this, but just talk about
give a bit of a recap.
The drum, a bit of tiny bit of a recap on the actual drum itself.
Yeah.
So
So we've talked about the drum quite a bit. I mean, most of the stuff we've done on level 3 technique so far has been revolved around spirit dance. But as we've said many times, Buchig, which is level 3, it has various names. Bo Buchig can be done with spirit dance, but it can be done with a number of other things. We outlined a series of Amsker level drum techniques before. The main one, I guess, that's stuck in people's minds, and which is one that sort of stuck in the patrons' minds, was Booking Hengrig, Mongolian word, where there are you're learning to infuse yourself with the drum. The Amsker level technique is about coming to understand nature through the closest part of nature to you, which is your body. And Booking Hengrig's about learning to use the drum to build an awareness of your body and how it relates to the outside world. So the drum, typically when you're learning, is held in the Havtas of folded wings position. I think I did a photo of that somewhere. What I will do is I will stick an up-to-date photo of the Havtas position with the drum on the Patreon members area, and so that we still. I'm sure it does exist somewhere out there. I just can't. It's so long ago now. Can't remember where.
I think you sent it to me. You definitely have a picture of it. But I think it might be prudent to just point out that if people do want to support us on Patreon, which is, of course, much appreciated, and you do get extra stuff like Damon's just said, what's the address, Damon? It's patreon.com/woven.
Woven Energy. All one word,
or no dash in between, it's just woven.
All one word, no dash, yeah.
Patreon.com/woven energy.
Yeah. And so the drum is held close to the body. This is for booking Hengrig, which isn't the technique we're doing today. With this one we've already covered. And you hold it very loosely, as if your arm is a folded wing of a bird. The exact hand position for holding it, I've also done a picture of. It's held very lightly. The layout of the internals of your drum has a bearing on how lightly you can hold it. If you have I believe you've got one of the cross-shaped drums. Is that right, Joe? Where the handle inside's a shape of a cross. Is that right? Yeah. So that's not a great for a beginner. It's fine for somebody who's experienced, but for a beginner, it's not a great layout. The one that I would suggest is what's known as a Hurt layout, which is like a wheel. It's like the spokes of a wheel. As soon as you see it, you'll see what I'm talking about. So it's the tensioning strings on the back of the drum. They form like a wheel shape, like the spokes of a bicycle wheel. And that's the kind that I would recommend for beginners, new people starting out with a drum.
Yeah, mine's definitely a cross.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with a cross, but you just have to hold it a bit more firmly. And that the need to hold it firmly makes it a bit more difficult to keep chillicity on when you start doing the technique.
Like to point something out as well. I remember you saying once that smell plays a good important factor in the drum, and the drum that I got, not only has it got a cross, but it actually smells of absolutely nothing. So it might be cool to go natural if you can. Purely
Essential
because
oils.
For the practical reason that it's got a natural smell to it, which is a direct link to the limbic system and is quite crucial to shamanic technique. That's
right. So you need if you go one of these modern drums that smells of nothing, then I recommend rubbing some essential oil inside the rim of the drum. Don't put it on the drum skin. Put it on the wooden rim, just to give a bit of a smell link to the drum. But obviously, if it's a traditionally made one, if you've made it yourself, it's likely to smell. It's likely to smell. So that's when Joe was saying that you should have purchased a drum. I was sort of thinking you should have made a drum. As I've said many times, my first drum was a biscuit tin. So you can't do any worse than my first drum. Unfortunately, my
it'll smell
drum,
of biscuits at least.
I don't know if I've come a long way or if I've gone a long way down in the world. There was a certain cool credibility to using a biscuit tin. But my current drum is absolutely gorgeous. It's a piece of artwork. It's made by a real artisan. It's just amazing artwork on it. And so I've gone from one extreme to the other pretty much over the period of 30 odd years. So you need some sort of link to the drum. Smell's a big part, as Joe rightly points out. And you can probably stand or sit for most of the drum technique exercises. Certainly the first one we're going to talk about today. In booking Hengreg, you want to incline your head in towards the drum. I don't mean the back of a shamanic drum is usually open, and so some of them you can actually literally stick your head inside it. You don't have to go at that extreme. You just want to put your face down near the drum so that you can feel the vibrations. You need to be comfortable. You need to be relaxed. You can stand, no problem. If you've got a sort of grove marked out, or I have some standing stones in the garden, so you use the central focus point as what you're facing. So if you're using a standing stone, you'll be facing towards the standing stone, not away from it. And you need to achieve chillicity before you do any technique. Regular listeners know this; they know how to do this. So we've been over it in minute detail in the course of the podcast.
The main episodes are episodes 7, 8, and 9, and then there's lots of references to it and additional material on it as the podcast progresses. But really, you want to start with 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah, that's right. And the booking Hendrick technique, which is sort of an Amskar stroke Celesti level technique, you start by just going into a state of Celesti, and then the drum is struck. I'm not saying you strike the drum is struck on the breath. Yeah. So when the breath changes, it's the breath leads what you're doing. But once you get deep into the state, it's almost the drum is leading what you're doing. But we've been over this in detail on the podcast before, and I want to crack on because this is level 1 stroke 2. We want to talk about level 3 today. After that, you get into a deeper state of Celesti. Once you get good with that, then you start doing it on the heart rate. You can tell that you are in a state of Celesti if you're able to do that, because you know what your heart rate is if you're in a state of Celesti. You don't have to sort of have the drumstick in your mouth and 2 fingers taking your pulse and hitting the drum. You know what your heart rate is if you're in a decent state of Celesti. And then the next level after that is this is really preparation for spirit dance, not for level 3 drum technique, in which case you can just stay in that Habtas position. Between the strikes, between every 3 heartbeats, you can flip. It doesn't have to be exactly 3, but roughly 3. You can flip the drum from the outside grip to the inside grip. Remember, we're holding it in the outside grip in the Habtas position. That means that the drum skin is on the back of my left forearm, or right forearm if you're doing Toshu team, but left forearm. And when I flip to the inside position, I'm now in the Terelt position, and the drum skin is on the inside of my left forearm. Yeah, so that's, and I can flip the drum between every 3 beats or 4 beats or 5, just as the spirit takes. You don't count them. It's just as you feel it's right time to flip the drum, then you flip the drum.
Might be nice for you to put that in the Patreon area as well.
Keep it going on the heartbeat, yeah. So that's the booking Hengreg technique. It's a cool technique. It's very, very basic drum technique. You're obviously, when you're doing it on the breath, it's going to be going a lot more slowly. You do it as the breath changes. So that's from the out to the in or the in to the out. But it's going to be going a lot more slowly than it is on the heartbeat, especially if you're actually doing spirit dance at the same time, because all the spirit dance techniques we've talked about so far, they can all be done with booking Hengreg. There's no problem with that. You could do Homiluk at the same time if you want to be really, really sophisticated. All that kind of thing can be done. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But one of the things you definitely need to keep on when you're doing level 3 anything technique, it doesn't matter whether it's spirit dance or whether it's Homiluk or whether it's level 3 drum technique, you need to keep your ayuk on. Ayuk, if we recall, is this idea of a physical Celesti. Celesti exists on a lot of different levels, but the normal way of doing things, the people do in their everyday lives, flicking a light switch, sometimes it displays a small degree of Celesti, but more than often than not, because of the kind of societies that we live in, it doesn't. And this is the idea of that you need to embody Celicity throughout your being, throughout everything. It's not just something that you do in your mind as if we were doing like transcendental meditation or something like that. This is not just about the mind. This is the mind and the spirit and the body all acting together as one vessel, one bagtamshtesab, one capacious container. And the physical aspect of that is very important. So just because we're switched from spirit dance to drum at level 3 doesn't mean that factors like ashqui, numlach, bochki, murch, that they're not in place. They still need to be in place. You need to have all of those in place. And the one that's particularly important for what I'm going to go on to talk about is bertachlach, that idea that you are covered with a cloth and somehow you're moving around underneath that cloth. Imagine you're in a Mongolian ger, but it doesn't have any structure, and it's just the cloth that makes up the outside of the tent or the ger is above you and around you and on you. And it's only a part of an analogy. because the idea of Muruch, where it's just the covering on the shoulders, it really needs to go further than that. And so Muruch and Berntaglach actually are kind of each other. They're the same thing. And it's like Berntaglach's like something like hidden within, but it's also the Muruch kind of feeling where you're covered by, what are you covered by? You're covered by nature, right? And that's really, really important, because level 3 technique is where you're learning techniques that are going to bridge everything with Chelicity and everything about Amska. It's all about you, right? It's all about what's internal within you. You are in Amska level technique, level 2, you are coming close to nature through the part of nature that's closest to you, your body. But beyond level 3, getting into level 4 and onwards, we're going to be dissolving that differentiation between the shaman and nature. So what we're learning at level 3 is the techniques, the foundational techniques that could enable us to do that. So there is a transitional, this level 3 is very much a transitional stage. It's a stage that you cannot do too much work on, because the higher stages, the higher levels of shamanism, like Moldach and so on, right up to the Nechdel, they require that you can do level technique without any thought whatsoever. You can do level 3 technique at a very sophisticated level while maintaining complete Chelicity, physical Chelicity and spiritual Chelicity. And obviously Chelicity of the mind, which is like the absolute base level of Chelicity. Yeah. So does that make some kind of sense to you, Joe? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just to point out, you've just used a hell of a lot of terms there. So we do go into those, or you go into those over the last few episodes, right? So over the last 10 episodes or so.
I did a review episode at some point in time, didn't I, mate? I did a review episode. Let me just see what that episode was. It was it's called Huch Alug. And it's not a main sequence episode. It's called Monologue Number 1. So that's where I kind of recapped a lot of these ideas. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Yeah. But I'm assuming that if you're wanting to have a go at level 3 drum technique, that you're pretty familiar with these ideas. It's if you're not, then trying level 3 drum technique is probably a bad idea. Let's probably go back to level 1 or level 2. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Got it.
So the first thing, what's the first thing we need to do with level 3? It's a thing called Dulcich. And what it is it's just simply keeping the vibration of the drum going. So you're hitting the drum. Probably the best way, you hold the drum. Probably good to practice booking Hendrik for a while. And then coming out of that, just keep Chelicity on, and then just hitting the drum. It no longer has to be on the heartbeat. In fact, it probably, unless you're doing fast spirit dance, you should be hitting it a little bit more quickly than the heartbeat. Because what you want to do is for the vibration in the drum not to die away. Now, sometimes if you hit the drum too hard, you can kill that. Yeah? You just want to keep I've got the drum on the wall. I don't know if this is even possible on a podcast. This is the problem with podcasts. But even if I just use my hand and I don't use a beater, I better use the beater. What you want to hear is that I don't know if you can, but you want to hear that it's not a constant beat, but I'm not allowing it to die. Yeah. You get that? Like that, yeah? So
that's with the beater. Are you just tapping it lightly with the beater there? Lightly.
If you hit it too hard, you can kill the vibration. So it's good to start light, yeah? So the issue is you're still in the half-cast position. You got that going. Your head's inclined into the back of the drum. What you want to feel is those vibrations. I'm sure you can. If you've been practicing booking Hendrik for a while, you'll feel those vibrations that are interacting with the movement of the energy inside your body. The vibrations are energy, and inside your body there is energy movement going on. There's your breath, there's your heart. If you're doing spirit dance at the same time, there's also all that kind of movement going on. There's all the changes of energy that go on in your body. And so what we're looking for is not to think about, not to imagine it, And we've talked about how to tell whether it's imagination or not at length in the past, but it needs to be in a state of chillicity. You at level 3, you're starting to have the energy from the environment interacting and intersecting with the energy patterns that are going on inside you. The issue here is that to make that easy, you're creating something far less subtle, which is the vibrations from the drum, than the energy that you typically get from the environment. That is why this is level 3 and not 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever. Yeah, the vibrations from the drum, they're energy patterns, and that I hope you noticed that I wasn't hitting it at a constant pace. I was hitting it fast, but there was a slight variation in the pace. That's important. You want to introduce some gravel into it, some granularity into it.
I mean, purely from an analytical point of view, just putting my old physics hat on, it's like vibrations and waves, isn't it? So when you hit the drum and there's that vibration going along the drum skin, if you hit it out of sync, then you're going to either add to the vibration or completely. At the extremes, you can double the vibration, or you can kill it totally, depending on when you hit it. So I guess it's like, rather than thinking about it analytically, you don't want to be killing it, but you want to be feeling where those touches need to be. So
maybe that's also, you got to remember, drum's a real thing. It's not a perfect instrument, especially the way they're made historically in Mongolia. It's the hide of a black bull, stretched over some laminated wood. It's not.
Hence the smell.
Yeah, but they can smell great, mate. Don't think that the smell's always bad. Yeah,
I'm a legit.
It can smell good. Yeah. But the point there is that I don't think of it like that. Like, you see those waveform signs. The way I would be described, what you want to keep the vibration going, but you want to introduce some gravel into it. Yeah, some grit. So that if you think of it as a waveform, it would be a very random looking kind of waveform with some kind of consistency in it. Yeah. Because that creates patterns. When you chuck a rock in the pool and it has ripples that come out from it quite evenly. But if you throw 3 or 4 rocks at the same time, those ripples all intersect with each other and they make a funny kind of like an interference pattern, right? That's what you want coming out of the drum.
They add to it and take away from the main vibration.
Yeah. But they can make quite complex patterns, and there's no harm in having quite a complex pattern coming out of your drum for what I want to talk about today. Yeah. So just the ability to do that is called Delsech. It's just the ability to keep that going. And obviously you've got to be able to keep it going in a state of chillicity. If you start thinking about it, how am I doing this? Which you probably will when you start off. You need to keep working on it and working on it and working on it until you can do it without sacrificing your state of chillicity. Yeah.
Can I just ask, right? That's a really, really good point as far as the learning process goes, because it's not like you want to be worried about keeping chillicity on all the time in the learning process. It's like you get used to chillicity, fair enough, and then you introduce a new technique, and then even though you might be pretty competent with chillicity, it'll disappear, right? Because it's a new thing you're learning, and then it creeps back in. And this cycle keeps happening as you learn new techniques, as you get better at techniques. Well, as you build your guchuch, as we talk about.
Exactly.
I guess.
Yeah. That's right. Another thing to say about Delsech is it's the analogy of the pool and throwing rocks in with those ripples. Some of those rocks of the drum are caused by the drum, and some of those rocks are caused by you. Yeah. The good news about you is that human beings are complex systems. There's a lot of stuff going on inside us. So you don't have to, in terms of the technique, you don't really have to worry about introducing those complex, the gravel into you. It's already there. Yeah. It's only the drum that you have to be able to get that ability to hit it with it's a constant enough pace that it keeps the vibration going, but it's not so constant that you are killing the gravel that's coming out of the drum. That's probably the best way to put it. And Delsech is both of those things. It's the ripples that are made in the energy pool, if you like. Some of them are caused by metaphorical rocks that are chucked in by the drum. Some of them are caused by metaphorical rocks that are chucked in by you. But the intersection pattern is common. It's shared. Does that make sense?
But yeah. Yep.
And that's what you're trying to get a sense of. So that's what Delsech is about. But again, don't analyze it with your mind. I'm sure regular listeners know, the second you analyze it, you've all tried it. The second you analyze it, you kill it, right? So that's Delsech. So Delsech isn't really a technique. It's a skill. Yeah, so think of it as a foundational skill for level 3, on top of your Ashqui, Numlach, Bochgi, Moruch, Bentaglach, and so on. Yeah, the thing that turns it into a Tsanwuch, which is a proper shamanic technique, is just like with spirit dance, where we have this morphing structure. Even though I used the term Tsanwuch in the context of morphing structure when we were talking about level 3 spirit dance, we're going to have morphing structure again, both physical and with the drum. So the very first technique that I'm going to tell you about I've got to apologize for the name, okay? Even for me, I've studied a bit of Mongolian in my life. It's hard to pronounce. It's Huithlasen Dabalska, yeah? Huithlasen Dabalska. So what you're going to do is you're going to get that going, you're going to get the Delsech going, and then you're going to keep half-tas, okay, throughout this. So the drum is not going to switch to Teoruk at any time. It's on the outside of the form. And you're going to move the drum slowly up and back over your head, keeping the vibration going, over the top of your head, and then down the back of your neck, down to your back. Yeah, this is the first thing to try. And then just slowly bring it back again, keeping the vibration on, and keeping Delsech on, and keeping Chilisty on, including physical Chilisty. Yeah? And so I'm going to use an analogy. I do not want you to imagine this. I'm just using this analogy in order that you can understand where the drum is going and how the technique is like. I'd like you to imagine that the back of the drum, the open part of the drum, is like a big torch, yeah? And the sound waves coming out of there, the gravelly sound waves that are coming out of there, are like a light beam, yeah, coming out of that torch, yeah? And your body is transparent, it's translucent, yeah? It's still complex inside, but it's made of like translucent stuff. And what you're doing is you're shining that torch through you. Now, a real torch can't do this because human beings are opaque. The light waves can't penetrate very much into the body, but the sound waves can. And this is the advantage of using the drum. I mean, you could do this technique with a torch, but it'd be pretty rubbish, right? You do it with a drum because those sound waves can penetrate into your body. And so what you're doing is in effect, is that interference pattern that's coming through the sound waves out of the drum and the energy changes that are going on within your body. And for instance, there's a very simple ones, the change of density in the lungs as you breathe in and out, that type of thing. You are using the drum in effect to kind of sound massage your chest, and then your neck, and then your face, and then over the top of your head, and then the back of your head, and then the back of your neck, and down to the back of your back, down your back, and then to repeat the process over and over. And not to think about when you're going to change direction either. You just naturally change direction as the spirit takes you, so you don't have to go all the way over every time. Yeah. And then, in a way, you're kind of starting to, bathe in the sound of the drum. You're starting to bathe, but you're bathing in it translucently. You're bathing in it as a clear component in the system, not as a closed component. It's not like you're tipping water over your head. It's like you're a tea bag. It's like if you were a tea bag, you're tipping water over your head as you're doing that. That's probably the best way to put it, yeah? And then the extension of Huithlasen Dalbachka is to start moving it as the spirit takes you around the whole of your body, around your abdomen, around to your back, around down your legs, around your loins, around down to your feet, over your other arm, yeah? Because, of course, the arm that's holding the drum is bathed in this stuff all the time, so you shouldn't have any problem picking that up.
So you're playing and experimenting with where it's almost like, like at an airport. Sorry for the analogy, but like at an airport where they get that little X-ray thing or whatever, and that beeper thing, and they go all over your body to try and detect stuff. Are you doing that to yourself with the drum?
Yes,
you're just
absolutely.
putting it wherever you want, and you're experimenting.
It's not where you want, because you're not
with
deciding. Yeah, but you're not deciding, right? We've talked about this before. It's find all the ways to cross the stream, right? This is it's Toshaltine, yeah. If you don't know what Toshaltine is, you definitely don't want to be listening to this episode. I'll make that point again. It's Toshaltine. So that's the first level of Huithlasen Dalbachka. Dabalka, sorry. Oh, God. It's too long since I studied Mongol, just too long. I think I stopped studying Mongol formally. I think it was 1995. But anyway. So,
for those that don't know, you and me, we do these podcasts by talking on a normal phone, and literally all I'm hearing because of the quality of the phone is I've got no chance.
That's good. So anyway, I think it's probably good enough. And anyway, I've got these technique names. Again, patrons area or the Grove, members area on the Grove. Probably I'll stick these techniques in so you can see what they look like. I might write them out. I did with some of them. I wrote them out in, I think it was the physical chillicity things. I wrote them out in traditional Mongol script, which looks great. So I might do the same with these. So that's the first level of Huithlassen Dabalka. That's correct, that time. The second level is then to introduce a sort of slight wobble into the drum as you're hitting it. So it's just the same thing, but the drum sort of rocks back and forward so that the beam that's coming out of the drum isn't just like shining straight out. It's slightly rocking back and forwards with a vibration, similar to the variation that you're putting in the drum. So what I mean is, this is why we really need video, but the drum is just rocking maybe an inch or two up at one side and down at the other side along the axis of your forearms. So if you imagine your forearms going into the drum at a 90-degree angle, it's not quite 90 degrees, but anyway, that sort of thing, then you're rotating your forearm, the drum's along the back of your forearm, you're rotating your forearm so that if the drum was static in the standard half-task position, the top of the drum would be coming about an inch or two closer to your face, and then an inch or two further away from your face. And ditto, as the top of the drum comes towards your face, the bottom of the drum moves away, and vice versa. Is that making some kind of sense, Joe?
Yeah, so it's
like
coming in and out, right? It's coming in and out. It's not twisting.
Exactly. You're like wobbling the beam. Yeah, you're making the beam wobble. And that takes some skill. This is definitely a learned skill. To keep, I mean, obviously it's easy enough to do if you're thinking about it, but in a state of chillicity, you really, really have to internalize that. So, in scientific terms, it's going through your spinal column, and it's not consulting your brain, and you get to this kind of rocking. And that same thing, once you get the sense for it, you'll be able to do, I guess this will be level 3 of the technique. So you do that, you do exactly the same technique. So you're still moving it all over your body. You're in a state of chillicity. You're experiencing, you're not analyzing, you're experiencing the interference pattern that stuff is making with the energy that changes within your own body, the natural energy changes within your own body. You get a sense for how that works, and you'll find that there's play in that, so that the wobble, just like the rhythm, it's fairly constant, but it's not completely constant. It's not complete. And again, it's adding more gravel into the overall experience. Level 3 technique, as we've said, the danger with anyone starting out on level technique is they will do the Tyrak thing, and it will become very bland, and they won't learn very much in the process. It's still level 3 technique. But, too much Tyrak
by that,
kills it.
Cut, constant.
Constant on the beat.
Like a constant dance
exactly.
Dance beat.
Exactly. And this is why you need to really, really be in a frame of mind not to entertain people, I mean, we've all been exchanging various, Homiluk, the shamanic technique Homiluk has become a sort of performance art form in Mongolia. And there's some people who are absolutely amazing of it. On Patreon, we've been exchanging videos of the band called The Who, the HU is The Who, who are phenomenal. But that whole thing puts you in a frame of mind. The fact that those guys exist, it puts you in a frame of mind that it has to be like musical. It has to be perfect. And if you go down that rabbit hole, you're going to miss the point of shamanic technique. The point of shamanic technique is to learn from nature. And so the more richness you can build into your level 3 technique, the more variety and variation you can build into it, the better, the more gravel you can put in it, because you're going to learn a lot more through doing that. It's like having a simple radar for nature versus a sophisticated, multi-wavelength radar for nature, if you like. So I don't know too much about radar, but I'm just trying to use some sort of an analogy. But the point is that sophistication mustn't And this is why so many people obsess over Tyrak, because Tyrak, the cutting, there's nothing wrong with it, but other than that, it reduces the richness of the experience. The more you use it, the more the richness of the experience is reduced. But the cutting is kind of just one part of a series of things. It's one part of a bunch of different energy changes, energy patterns that you need to use. So you can just think of that wobble. Every time it changes, you can think of that as Tyrak. Yeah. Every time that there's a little bit of granularity in it, that's a more sophisticated Tyrak rather than just, sort of hopping up and down on one leg to a regular beat, which is Tyrak, right? But it's just like, it's like really the most boring Tyrak ever, and so you also want your Tolko, your Negdech, your Totonon, your Asach, your Shuruk, your Egeldech, and sure enough, you want Tyrak as well as Tengus, yeah? Or Chirich, yeah? So you definitely want that Tyrak there, but you want it to be in the flow with all of the other energy changes. You don't just want it to be, by itself, alone, because that doesn't correspond to the world. That doesn't correspond to nature. Nature is not like that. These things don't live in isolation. You can artificially isolate them, and in a way, that's what you do in dance. I mean, they actually call it isolation or isolating. A friend of mine who's a phenomenal dancer can do that, move parts of their body that are without moving any of the rest of the body. And it looks good. It looks super cool, but it's not shamanic dance. It's not, it's a learned skill, but if you can learn anything about nature from it, that's probably the best way to put it.
Just out of curiosity, do you think like the fact that the drum, which has permeated our every aspect of who we are as human beings, it's in every culture, it's in every form of music, pretty much. Do you think that has its roots because the drum is so important to our very being from a shamanic point of view, shamanic technique, and it's almost like a look back into our shamanic past and how important
to a certain extent, absolutely. I mean, to a certain extent, the drum evolved with us, right? We
but even to this very day, it's like you can't look anywhere without seeing drums.
But when you really get, I mean, that's why Deltec is a great technique to practice, because what you find out is that the shaman is a drum. Yeah, the shaman is a drum, and in a way, the drum is a symbol of the shaman because the shaman is a drum. The drum picks up the energy from the beater and then transfers it out into the world. The shaman picks up the energy from nature and then transfers it out into the world. It's not an accident that of all the musical instruments we could use, the drum is one that is favoured by shamans because Booking Hengreg, I refuse to explain the meaning of that term originally. The meaning of that term is pretty much what I just said. It's pretty much what I just said. Is the shaman is a drum. Yeah. And you can definitely get a sense of that through Delsec. What you find is your body starts vibrating and you get good enough at Delsec. That skill, remember, that's not the skill. The technique I've been describing is Huilas and Dabalska. The Delsec is the skill. Once you get that skill, you get good enough of that, you'll find you can do it without a drum. Yeah. You find you do the same thing without a drum while you're doing your spirit dance or whatever. The other thing is that rotation, the rotation that I talked about, that you're putting into your forearm, that rocking back and forwards with the drum. Delsec and Huislassen Dabalska are also great ways to learn a technique that you will see Mongolian shamans and shamans all over the world using a lot. It's a technique that you see an awful lot. You won't have any problem finding a Mongolian shaman doing this for instance, on YouTube. As long as you know how to search for Buch and Cyrillic. There's loads of them on there. And I think there's one doing it on, there's a female shaman sitting on the ground in that promotional video we did for the Grove, sitting on the ground doing it, which is that rotation, that wobble that you're getting in your forearm. Just switch that to your spinal column. Yeah, switch. So this is going to be the next level of this technique, is to switch that into your spinal column. I mean, don't stop doing it with your forearm, but start doing the same thing, moving back and forwards. As you're scanning your body all over with the increasingly sophisticated gravel, sound gravel, you want to you get that same sense, but it's the same sense. The problem with that technique, that you'll see the shaman rotating quickly from side to side along the line of their spine. The problem with teaching that as a technique is everybody starts doing this kind of body rotation, and it's not like that. There's like a tuning fork aspect to that. It's like a physical bird shikarate that's in that movement, and you'll pick it up first in your forearm a lot better than you'll pick it up in your spine. Yeah, so there your huith lesson Dabalska can teach you that basic technique that a lot of shamans do just when they're doing their normal booking hengreg. So then you can, once you've learned that, you can sit yourself down. Once you've learned that technique through practicing Delsech, you can sit yourself down, you can get in a state of chillicity, and then you can do just that as you're doing booking hengreg. Yeah, so you can go back to your Amskar technique and get a more rich experience with that as well. So that's the number of levels for this technique. I've got another one I want to talk about, but for Huith Lassen Dabalka, that's about as far as I wanted to go with it. Has that made some kind of sense? I know we don't have video, but
no, definitely. I mean, like you say, I think extra. Well, we bang on about it all the time, but it's so hard to convey this stuff on a podcast with audio. So, extra resources are inevitable.
Just if anybody is listening and wondering why we're using Mongolian words instead of English words, most people listening probably know by now. But the answer is there are no English words for the things we're talking about.
Listen to episode 6. Is it 5 or 6? Listen to episode 5 or 6. It's the one that we did on the word spirit. It's a really good insight into language and how the Western language has evolved versus like the Far Eastern Chinese, Japanese, and Mongolian kind of languages. And it's really interesting. It's a really interesting episode.
Checking which that episode is.
I think it's 6.
Because we've actually just mentioned that episode. Oh no, it's 5. It's 5.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you nearly got it right, Joe. It's well remembered. So we've actually just mentioned that episode on the Heretics podcast as well. It's one of my favorite episodes. Episode 5.
Mine too. I actually got an email just now, from somebody who wrote into to our Woven Energy email and just said, they found it absolutely brilliant, that episode. So that's really nice to hear as well. So that episode was hitting home with a few people. And I think for very good reason. It makes perfect sense. It really does. So it's worth listening to.
Yeah. So that's the reason. And it doesn't have to be Mongol. We know a lot of Chinese terms for these things. We know a lot of Japanese terms for these things. But Mongol's the language that does have shamanic words in it that I'm most familiar with, so that's the one that I tend to use, along with our made-up words like Chillicity and stuff like that, which is Bangdamstesab in Mongolia. So that's Huith Lassen Dabalka, which is, if you want to remember it, it's a kind of idea of using the drum to generate an analogy. Don't imagine it, though, for goodness sake. Don't imagine it. We're talking about real stuff, not imagination here. Yeah, to generate interference patterns within your body that you don't analyze, but you do learn from in a different way. You experience them. You experience that kind of richness, and that builds your guchach, and it also builds a foundation for modoch, eilal, the higher levels of technique, and guruch, and these sort of things. These higher levels of technique. So that would well and truly be a level 3 drum technique, Huith Lassen Dabalka. So the next technique I want to talk about has an even longer name. I apologize. Lat Shigchirin Dachjuk. Yeah. So I'm probably not going to trip off the tongue anytime soon. This is somewhat different. So this is back to your basic Delsech. Yeah. And when you're practicing the Delsech technique and you feel those, so forget all of that sophisticated vibrations and rotation and stuff that was going on with Huith Lassen Dabalka. You're not doing that. You're just doing the basic Delsech, but in a way, you can think of the Huith Lassen Dabalka as prep for this one. You want to then start moving the drum further away from your body and start walking around. So you might want to keep it in half-tas, but extend the half-tas out and maybe get to the point where you flip to Terilt. And now you're going to have a harder job, because the reason shamans put the head into the back of the drum is that the vibrations are much clearer that way. You get less off the front, but you can still do it off the front. And so what you want to do, first of all, is in the state chillicity, you want to keep those vibration patterns going through your body. You can hit the drum a little harder if you want, as long as you don't kill the wave, as long as you don't kill its output. You want to keep a sense on, and you'll have to practice, because this is, as you move the drum physically away from your body, you can do it in any direction. You can go up, out, whichever way you want, but the drum skin should be pointing at you, either with the drum in the half-task position, in which case the back of the skin's pointing at you, or in the tail position, in which case the front of the skin is pointing at you. Keep it pointing at you, and then start keeping that on in a state of chillicity, and just start walking around, just like in the preparatory episodes we did, just talking about the very basics of spirit dance. Just start walking around. You want to be in a natural environment for this one. You don't want to do this one indoors. You want to move around your grove. If you've got a central focus, your standing stone or whatever, you just want to start moving around, just walking around in that same kind of, way that we talked about. Keep all the things on. Ashqui, Numluk, Bochki, Murich, Bentagla. Keep all those things on as you're moving around. And then just start allowing the drum to kind of lead you. What I mean by that is you've got a certain amount of richness in those waves, and just allow yourself to be turned by the bit of gravel that we've got in those waves. Allow your body smoothly. Don't force yourself around and jump around without any Tyrex. Nice and smooth. But maybe walk around quite briskly, and just move around towards and away from objects or around objects in your environment. So like in my garden, I've set up 3 standing stones, and so I can move in and out of these things quite easily. If I'm up on the top of the moor, we've got the amazing hurlers. Look it up on YouTube, which are these massive standing stones that have been there forever. 3 big stone circles. It doesn't have to be as exotic as that. Get out in the woods and just move around the trees. But to a certain extent, you want to get your brain switched off heavily, be able to walk and move around and constantly change direction, but change smoothly. You don't have to do sudden changes of direction. I know we have done some techniques like that in spirit dance. I'm not talking about that. Walk in circles, walk as in figures of 8, walk in patterns, and allow the drum to influence your movement, and also the environment to influence your movement. So if you find yourself steering towards a tree, the tree will steer you around it. If you find yourself moving towards a rock, the rock will steer you around it. Sometimes you might find you want to leave the ground, you want to jump, or whatever. That's just fine. But what you mustn't do is make decisions. Yeah, This is the key point with Latchik, Chichirian, Dagjuch, is you're not making decisions. You're allowing both the drum and the environment to guide you as you're moving around. Again, this is a very rapid beat on the drum. So it's still that same Delsec technique. We're definitely going to do another episode, probably quite soon, on level 3 drum technique, which I'll be telling you some different kind of level 3 techniques. But this whole episode's really been about this Delsec technique. And the thing is, if you've got a grove, you know it very, very well. If you practice in the same grove all the time, you know it well. You're going to be able to do this quite quickly than if you don't know the environment, in which case chillicity is going to go for a while until you get used to it. But in some ways, not knowing the environment is also beneficial. That's a bit of Toshilteen, right? So those woods that we used to train in, do you remember near that reservoir thing, Joe?
Yeah.
Do you remember there? They were ideal for this. You could move around freely between the trees. The ground wasn't flat, was it? There was ups and downs and stuff like that. And also, I remember in the autumn, there was amazing piles of leaves all over the ground, and your feet are moving through the leaves. It makes a fantastic sound. The sound of the leaves moving around with your feet will be kicking up more sound vibrations, joining in with the drum, all increasing the richness. And what you want to do is feel like you're a leaf yourself. Feel like there's wind, and there's a very turbulent kind of wind blowing you around. And a lot of that wind, not all of it, a lot of that wind is coming out of the drum, but it's not a constant wind. It's a rich wind with lots of different variations. It's just like turbulence, yeah. And so what you want to do is feel that you're a leaf being tossed around by that wind. You are not making it happen. The turbulence within the sound and the turbulence within the energy patterns in the environment, which, remember, that physical objects are also energy, right? They're quite strong energy patterns, rocks and trees and stuff, and the shape of the ground is also an energy pattern. All of those things in a state of chillicity are moving you. They're blowing you around like a leaf in the wind, yeah? And I'm just going to mention, I know you got a question, Joe, but I'm just going to mention that do not worry what anybody thinks of you. As soon as you do that, you will kill your chillicity. In an uneducated person's analysis, you're probably going to look strange doing that. And they probably have less polite ways of saying it. Look strange. Yeah. Be happy looking strange. Yeah. Because what you look like is completely irrelevant to this technique. And that's the thing with a lot of the problems with modern shamanism come from its aesthetic aspects. People try to make it look cool. They try to make it look new age. And, that's why I feel a bit guilty. I always feel a bit guilty about this gorgeous bit of artwork that some amazing artisan has painted on my drum. In some ways, I feel guilty about that, because that's not really shamanism,
It's nice, but it's irrelevant to a certain
extent. And it does make me feel a bit uncomfortable sometimes, But having said that, it's so what? So what if I feel uncomfortable? That's me sort of uncomfortable with me looking at myself, which is also useless if you want to be a shaman. So what I'm saying is you're going to be in Latchig Chichirin Dachjuk. You're going to be a leaf tossed around by the wind. What is the wind? It's the energy patterns within your own body. It's the energy patterns, the strong energy patterns that the drum are making for you. It's the energy patterns that the environment is making for you. The shape of the ground, the leaves on the ground. If you can kick up the leaves, that's amazing. To make that kind of sound, Or also I practice this at the beach, get my shoes off, get down in the water, on the sand, the sound of the waves, waves are always amazing, right? But also the sound of my feet moving through the very shallow water, this type of stuff, fantastic. The trees, all that kind of stuff. The real wind, if it's really windy, this is amazing, yeah? Because you can be a leaf in a real wind, not just a sound wind.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, that was on my mind about the actual wind, because obviously you're talking about these different vibrations interacting with each other inside the drum and how we're almost absorbing that and translating that into movement or whatever. But the actual wind has so many changes, so many interactions with each other, which we can use also.
It's fantastic. Sure. Yeah, and it can be strong. And, if it's a gale, the wind is going to catch your drum, right? And you might think that's the problem. How am I going to, it's a real strong gale, storm force kind of thing. How am I going to keep my drum in place? No, that's the wrong question. You want the wind to do what it wants with your drum, and you just go along with it. The drum is part of you and part of the drum. Whatever the wind does with your drum, that's what's happening. Yeah?
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Cool. So, should we leave it there, Damon? I think that's
that's the two techniques. So the base, just to recap, the base skill is Delsech. And then you have two techniques built on it, Huitlassen Dabalka and Latchig Chichirin Dachjuch. And the next one of these, which I think we'll do quite soon, either the next episode or the one after, it'll be Level 3 Drum Technique Part 2. And I'll tell you about some very different drum techniques to give you a different perspective on Level 3. Yeah?
Excellent.
Cool.
Right, fantastic. Let's leave it till next time then. We were talking about actually moving on to what we called Armabella, but we can talk about that later on.
Maybe we'll do that in the next one. You wanted to do ice first, didn't you? So let's do one on ice, and then we'll do another Level 3 drum technique, yeah?
Definitely. I mean, it's all shamanism anyway, so it's all
absolutely
part of the richness and the tapestry that is the shamanism we talk about. Thanks again, Damon. It's been a fantastic episode. Guys.
Hey, likewise, mate.
Yeah, you can support us on Patreon by going to patreon.com/wovenenergy. Loads of extra resources on there, and if I'm not mistaken, Damon, if you donate a certain amount, then you can ask questions of yourself. And
we have a great discussion group going now. We have a great discussion group with the power patrons and founder patrons. It's very, very healthy. Everybody's contributing. I've learned a lot from it. And actually, this episode came from that discussion group. It was an idea that came out in that discussion group. So, it's been great.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot, guys, for listening, and we'll see you next time.
All right, all the best.